In this video, we'll be looking at another new feature of Plait, unpaid breaks. In many dom care situations, unpaid breaks are not relevant. If they don't apply to your service, be assured that unpaid breaks will only apply if they are activated, and so if you make no changes, you will see no changes. For supported living and other services which are shift-based, where a unpaid break may be needed for care workers, we can activate the new features through the organization setup. As the unpaid break is relevant to cost and charge, the configuration is done through the tariff structure. So let's take a look at the tariffs tab, and we'll see here a new field, allow unpaid break for events of at least. So the first thing we need to do to enable unpaid breaks is to tick that box. Once we've done that, we are able to specify the minimum duration of any event for which a break can apply. So if I was to save this now, any event of at least 3 hours in duration can have an unpaid break. However, if I do nothing further, then none of my events are going to have an unpaid break. And if I wanted to define breaks, I would have to visit each individual event and do that manually. Obviously, that would be a fairly arduous process, so we can introduce automation by adding some default break rules. If I click on the Add button here, you'll see that each default break rule consists of a minimum event duration and a corresponding break duration. So my first rule will say that if an event is at least 3 hours in duration, I would like the default break, to be 30 minutes. If it's a 4-hour event, it will be 40 minutes. If it's a 5-hour event, it will be 50 minutes. And if it's a 6-hour event, it will be 60 minutes. So having saved these 4 rules, all of the events in my system that are at least 3 hours long will have a break automatically calculated. I won't need to visit any of the events or shifts for the event break to apply. It will be done automatically. When those events are invoiced and paid, the break length will be calculated, and the unpaid element and the uncharged element of those events will be automatically taken into consideration. Of course, however, there are going to be situations in which you would like to override those defaults. So we can do that by visiting the individual events or shifts. So let's go to one of our care workers, and on Will Kane's calendar, we'll see that he has 2 shifts on Monday. He has a daytime shift from 9 until 3 and then an evening shift. Let's look first at the daytime shift. To make changes to the break for this event, we click Edit, Edit with tab screen, and look at the Caregivers tab. Here we'll see 2 new fields, break length and break start offset. The values for these 2 fields have been calculated automatically. For the break length, the value of 60 has come by reference to the shift duration. So 9 till 3 p.m., that's 6 hours. You will remember that when we set up our 4 default break rules earlier, the last of those rules said that for an event of at least 6 hours, the unpaid break length should be 60 minutes. So that's where that value of 60 has come from. The break start offset is used to specify when the break will start. So after 150 minutes, there will be 60 minutes of unpaid time. The value of 150 has been calculated so that the break will fall by default in the middle of the event. So there's 150 minutes of paid work, 60 minutes of unpaid break, and then another 150 minutes of paid work. If we add those 3 things together, we reach a value of 360, which is, of course, the total shift duration. If I want to change either of these 2 values, it's simply a case of incrementing or decrementing them as required. We do that in 5-minute increments. So let's say that we wanted to increase the break length to 90 minutes. You may notice that when I did that, the cost of the event, which is to say the amount that Will Kane will be paid for this event, has decreased. And of course, that's because he has a longer unpaid break, and that means fewer paid minutes. If I click on the link there, you can see he is now being paid for 270 minutes. That value of 270 plus 90 gives us the 360 minutes, which is the total shift duration. Another thing you may have noticed when I changed the break length, this link appeared. So this is reminding me that there is an override. It is reminding me that the calculated value, which is to say the default value, was 60, and it is inviting me to click on the link to clear that override. If I want to clear it, it's simply a case of clicking, and you'll see that the break length returns automatically to the default value of 60, and the cost increases accordingly. If I visit the Service Users tab, you'll see the charge for this event is £72.50 by default here, and that is based upon a number of worker minutes of 300. So this 300 plus 60. Again, that's the total event duration of 360. If I increase the break length to 90 again, we see that the charge decreases, and that's because the number of worker minutes decreases. So if the break is unpaid, it is also not charged. So let's talk about the implications of having an override. In this case, I've overridden the break length to a value of 90 minutes. If I was to make any changes to this event subsequently, increasing or decreasing the duration of the event, that overridden break length is going to continue to apply. Even if I decreased the event length to considerably less than its current length, so it's now 6 hours in duration, if I reduced it to 3 hours and saved that, the break length of 90 minutes would continue to apply, and that's because I have actively set that override, and the system is taking that as being something that it can trust. This means that where overrides have been set, you will of course need to remember those, and you will need to take those into account and probably revisit this tab and make changes to these values if you significantly change the parameters of the event. Of course, you won't be able to change event parameters to anything invalid, so if I was to try to save a significantly reduced duration to this event, if I was to make it just 1 hour in length, for example, it would tell me that the break length is now invalid. Finally, let's talk about the significance of the break start offset. You may have noticed, or you will notice if I do it now, that I can change this to anything as much as 270. The value of 270 is significant because if I was to add the 90 minutes to that, that's the full event duration. So here we're saying that the break is going to be the final 90 minutes of the event. If it allowed me to increase that value by any more, the break would finish after the event finishes, which of course is invalid. But you may have noticed that as I changed that value, the cost did not change. And that is because in this particular example, the tariff structure has been set up such that the same rate of pay applies all day. So it doesn't actually matter when the break falls. But we may have a different tariff setup, and it may be very important as to when the break falls. And we can see an example of that if we have a look at the evening shift. Go to the tabbed screen for this event, and you'll see that here we've got 2 care workers on the shift. You'll notice that even though these are all default values, you'll notice there's no link here telling me that it's an override. So these are 4 different default values. You'll notice that the break length for the first care worker is different to the break length for the second care worker, and that's because these 2 care workers are from different organizations, and the break parameters are treated entirely independently in that case. The 2 organizations that apply in this particular example also have different tariff structures set up. So in this case, the evening event for Will is paid at the basic rate, but for Natalie, there is an element of basic pay and also some enhanced pay. The enhanced pay kicks in at 9 p.m. So in this case, it's the last hour of the event, hence 60 minutes of enhanced pay. The break by default is falling from 7:45 until 8:15. So in other words, the entire duration of that break falls during the basic pay. If I was to significantly increase the break start offset so that the break now finishes after 9 p.m., as you can see there, this care worker is now receiving fewer minutes of enhanced pay because some of the break falls during the enhanced pay times. So it's in this situation, the break start offset will, as you can see, as I change that value, you will see that it changes the cost of the event, and it will also change the charge. So as I mentioned at the beginning, when an event that has a break is invoiced and is paid, these values will be used to affect the values that are ultimately paid to the care worker and charged to the service user's funder. The way that that is presented will be dependent upon how the printed invoices and pay slips are designed, and that will be something that you will discuss with us when it comes to implementing those bespoke layouts.